Imagine a night in the Egyptian desert, so quiet that even the wind sounds like a whisper from the past. The sky stretches endlessly, adorned with stars that flicker like the eyes of ancient gods still watching the world of men. In the distance, the dunes shift slowly, breathing in the rhythm of timeless sands. There is no life here, except for the soft hiss of sand. No light but the faint glow of campfires kept by the desert's silent guardians. Here is where the story begins, in a stillness that wraps the world like a gentle veil. The night feels long and tender, guiding the mind to wander through forgotten tales of fire, of curses, of eternal rest that was never asked for. Prepare to listen to a story that moves as slowly as grains in an ancient hourglass. There are no loud voices, no surprises, only the soft murmurs of history awakening in whispers. Close your eyes and let the image of the desert form in your thoughts. There, beneath the starlit sky and the weight of ancient dust, the long-dead kings still sleep. Yet not all of them rest peacefully. Some of them burned in silence, becoming fiery mummies, cursed to glow forever. They were not burned by human hands, nor by candles or incense, but by something older, something that time itself cannot explain. The fire was not one of destruction, but of preservation. Each spark holds a memory from an age unreachable to modern minds. As you listen, let your breathing fall into rhythm. Let your curiosity flow slowly, like the Nile moving patiently through the land of gods. For tonight, we will wander through the tale of mummies that never fade, whose bodies still smolder after thousands of years. In the western desert of Egypt, in a region rarely mentioned in the official records of archaeologists, lies a vast plain known among Bedouins as Al-Nar al-Kafi, meaning the hidden fire. They say that on certain nights, especially when the moon vanishes from the sky, a faint reddish gold light rises from behind the dunes. There are no sounds, no signs of life, only the shimmering glow that dances gently in the air, like the breath of an unseen spirit that does not wish to be found. Travelers who have lost their way there speak of a strange warmth in the air, even in the coldest hours of the night, and of sand that trembles softly beneath their feet as if it held a heartbeat that never stopped. The legend of this place has lived for centuries. It is said that beneath the thick layers of ever-shifting sand lies the tomb of the desert kings who were never acknowledged in Egypt's official history. They were known as the Kings of Fire, rulers of tribes who lived between oases and valleys. Far from the influence of the pharaohs along the Nile, they worshipped a different god one, unknown in hieroglyphs, called the Light from beneath the earth. This god had no temple, no statue, only an eternal flame said to be kept in an underground chamber made of black stone. The Kings of Fire believed that when they died, the flame would consume their bodies, turning flesh into embers, and their souls would become guardians of silence. Modern archaeologists dismiss this as a myth born of desert imagination. Yet behind the skepticism linger traces that defy explanation. In 1892, a British explorer named Edward Halley wrote in his journal that he found a fragment of limestone engraved with the image of a man engulfed in flames, wearing an expression of calm serenities, though meditating within fire. He claimed to have discovered partially burned linen that remained flexible, as if the fire that touched it had not been of earthly heat. That fragment later disappeared, along with Halley himself, who never returned from his next expedition. To this day, few dare to approach the region. Treasure hunters say their compasses stop working there, and campfires refuse to burn. Yet, after every sandstorm, remnants of black stone structures emerge from the ground walls of what seems to be a buried temple. Among the stones, a faint scent of burning resin sometimes lingers, the same used in mummification, though sharper, metallic, almost molten. And through it all, one whisper remains constant among the old desert keepers. The fire that burns beneath the sands is no ordinary flame. It is the breath of the cursed kings, a light that never fades, for even death itself refuses to extinguish it. Around 3,000 years before the birth of Christ, during a period not fully recorded on stone inscriptions, Egypt entered a dark age of transition. Several dynasties competed for power, and parts of the western lands broke away from central control. In the barren valleys and hidden oases, small, unknown kingdoms arose. Led by rulers who refused to worship the gods of the Nile, they built no pyramids, wrote no stories on temple walls, and left behind no tombs to be revered. They chose silence, believing that the afterlife required not grandeur, but fire, the sacred fire that carried consciousness into eternal light. They were known as the Kings of Fire, mysterious rulers whose names were erased from royal lists for defying divine law. The story of this fiery kingdom emerges from faint accounts by ancient Greek travelers who visited Egypt after the Persian conquest. One of them, Demetrius of Thassos, wrote of a western land inhabited by priests who lived in silence, guarding a sacred flame beneath the ground, never looking directly at the sun. According to his writings, these firekeepers did not wear ordinary cloth, but garments woven from heated stone fibers, molded into robes that could not burn. He claimed to have seen the ashes of human bodies not entirely consumed, but transformed into a glossy black substance like obsidian. Yet his record ends abruptly, as though the story had been deliberately cut short. Some modern archaeologists speculate that the legend may be linked to experimental burial practices during the 18th dynasty, when certain priests used highly flammable resins to accelerate mummification. But the difference with findings at Al-Nar al-Kafi lies in the bodies themselves. The remains show no signs of ordinary burning. Some bones appear melted in specific areas, as if touched by molten metal, while others remain intact. This was not natural fire, but concentrated heat directed with purpose. Another theory proposes that the Kings of Fire were a sect of Ra worshippers who took their faith to extremes. They believed that to truly unite with the sun, the body must be burned until it merged with light. But ancient myths say that when the ritual was first performed, the flame they summoned came not from the sky, but from the earth. That fire never faded, never cooled, and left a black stain upon the stones that endures to this day. From then on, their tribe vanished without a trace. Now, in that same place, whenever the desert wind blows a certain way, travelers hear a long, deep breath rising from beneath the earth. Some believe it is only the sound of shifting sand among rocks, but to those who grew up nearby, it is known as the Breath of the Sleeping Kings, a song without melody, circling in the air, reminding that the fire below the ground is still alive, waiting for something yet to come. In the western desert of Egypt, about 120 kilometers from the Bahariya oasis, lies a region known by locals as the Valley of Smoke. There is no sign of life. There no water. No vegetation, only blackish red hills that look like the remains of a giant ember frozen in time. When night falls, the air turns bitterly cold, yet the ground still gives off a faint warmth, like coals that refuse to die. Travelers crossing this valley quicken their camel's pace, believing that something beneath the sands should never be disturbed. From afar, under the moonlight, the desert seems to pulse slowly, alive with a breath that does not belong to the wind. In 1934, a young archaeologist named Harold Whitcomb set out to explore the area after hearing tales of the land that burns beneath your feet. He departed from Cairo with 3 local guides and 2 donkeys carrying simple equipment. The journey took 5 days across a silent desert, marked only by the whisper of wind eroding the stone. When they finally reached the valley, Whitcomb wrote in his journal that the air smelled strange, like sulfur or smoke, but like hot metal doused with water. At the valley's center, they found a narrow crack between 2 large rocks, and from it came a gentle breath of warm air. The temperature was not enough to burn, but it made the sand tremble faintly under their fingers. As they dug near the crack, the sand turned jet black, smooth and glass-like, as if molten metal had once flowed there. Whitcomb noted that their compass needles spun erratically near the ground, as though disturbed by a shifting magnetic field. On the first night, the local guides refused to sleep near the crack. They built a campfire far away, and as the night grew still, Whitcomb heard a faint whisper coming from the direction of the fissure. Low, vibrating hum, rhythmic and slow, like the tone of an ancient instrument played deep underground. The next morning, he approached the crack alone. He wrote that the morning light made the surrounding stones look like living skin, glossy and slick. When he touched one, he felt a faint pulse running beneath the surface, as though something alive stirred below. He lowered a small lantern into the gap, but its light vanished into the dark without reflection, as if the void itself consumed it. Moments later, the warm air stopped and was replaced by a sharp, icy coldness that numbed his skin. Whitcomb wrote that the sensation was like being watched by something unseen, waiting below. He ended his journal with a single strange line: "This land breathes," and each breath carries a story not yet ready to be told. The expedition ended abruptly the next day. No official report was ever sent to the Cairo Museum, and Whitcomb vanished on his way back to the oasis. Only his journal and a few blurred photographs were found years later in an old trunk at a London auction. In one photo, the desert appears flat with 2 large stones at the center, and between them, a dark line like a wound that never healed. Some modern researchers reviewing the photos believe the site might lead to a network of underground tombs yet undiscovered. But no one has dared to continue the search. The Valley of Smoke remains silent, buried beneath sand and time, waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to listen again to the breath rising from the belly of the earth. In 1978, nearly half a century after Whitcomb's last expedition. A group of Egyptian and French researchers rediscovered what was believed to be pages from his original journal. The notes were found in the library of Alexandria University, among documents salvaged from an old archive fire. Curiously, several pages appeared newly rewritten, as if by another hand. Marginal notes in a mixture of Old Arabic and French read, "They are still below. Fire is not a symbol. Fire is them." The cryptic line caught the attention of Dr. Leila Morsi, a Cairo-based archaeologist fascinated by the link between Egyptian mythology and geothermal phenomena in the Western Desert. She believed Whitcomb's so-called Valley of Smoke was actually part of a vast, forgotten subterranean necropolis. Dr. Leila and her team began their expedition with modern equipment, ground-penetrating radar, and thermal sensors. They arrived in early winter when daytime temperatures were mild. But what surprised them wasn't the heat underground, it was something subtler. The radar revealed a massive, hollow chamber beneath the surface, dome-shaped and elongated. The temperature inside was far higher than the surroundings, though no volcanic activity was detected. Before the signal was lost, the device recorded rhythmic pulses like a slow heartbeat. That night, camped at the valley's edge, a metallic scent mixed with burning incense drifted on the wind. One technician noted that the thermometers fluctuated with steady rhythm, as if a moving heat source pulsed beneath the sand. Around midnight, a team member saw a faint golden-red glow between the rocks. He thought it was the campfire's reflection, but it was too far and came from the same fissure where Whitcomb had once lowered his lantern. The next day, Dr. Leila lowered a camera into the crevice with a steel cable. For several seconds, the footage showed only darkness. Then a dim red light appeared. It flickered like a flame moving slowly in the distance. Most disturbing was the faint outline of a human face in the glow like a half-burned mummy mask. The camera overheated, the cable trembled, and they pulled it back. The lens was cracked, coated in a thin black layer resembling soot, but when touched, it was cold and moist. The thermal data was unexplainable. No natural heat source existed nearby. That night, Leila noted faint tremors beneath their tents. She couldn't sleep and stepped outside. The desert was calm, but far beyond the dunes, she saw a faint flickering glow, as if fire danced just out of sight. The longer she stared, the more the light formed into tall, still silhouettes facing her direction. She wrote one final line before closing her journal. Whitcomb was right. The land breathes. But perhaps it is not the earth we know that breathes. The team's report was filed to the Ministry of Antiquities, but never fully published. A few photos and clips leaked to the media, then quickly vanished. Dr. Leila resigned a year later and disappeared near the Siwa oasis. No one has ever found her. Locals renamed the area the Valley of Sleeping Fire. They believe that beneath the sands lie ancient guardians' bodies aflame, but unconsumed. Mummies burning with eternal fire, keeping the secrets of a forgotten king. Long before Whitcomb, before Dr. Leila, even before the first stone of the Great Pyramid was laid, the western desert of Egypt held a legend unrecorded on any papyrus. It lived only in whispers, passed from shepherd to shepherd, from an old oasis guard to his young son. They called it the Tale of the Firekeepers, a story never spoken aloud at night for fear of summoning their hot breath from beneath the sands. The legend tells of an ancient kingdom at the far western edge, away from the life-giving Nile. Known not for its wealth, but for its oath to guard something no human should see. Something called the Heart of the Sun, a glowing stone believed to pulse with the life of the god himself. The nameless king of that realm was said never to sleep. He ruled from a throne of black stone in a windowless chamber surrounded by lanterns that burned without oil. Their light was not yellow or orange like ordinary fire, but deep red like molten iron. The priests claimed it was not flame, but the souls of old guardians burned to illuminate the king. In ancient records found at Abydos, there appears a symbol of a human figure with fire in its chest, beneath which hieroglyphs roughly translate to "He who burns but does not perish." The people around that kingdom lived in fear. They were forbidden to look into the eyes of the palace guards, whose bodies were wrapped in resin and gold dust. It was said the guards never truly died, but slept within unquenchable flames. Each night before dawn, a sound like heavy wind filled the air, 1,000 breaths drawn at once. They called it the breath of the fire god. Whenever it was heard, a human soul was said to be taken to fuel the eternal fire beneath the tomb. The story endured long after the kingdom vanished. Nomads still warn their children never to light a fire at night in the western desert. If human fire challenged the guardian's light, it would be extinguished forever. Some tales speak of burial chambers deep below, made of black stone, smooth as glass, carved with crying faces. Inside, the mummies stand upright, with small red stones embedded in their chests, pulsing faintly like hearts. Those stones were called hearts of flame. Modern archaeologists dismiss the legend as myth born from underground gas igniting spontaneously, but locals disagree. To them, it is not superstition, but memory, a warning from the past. Not all gods desire worship. Some only wish to be remembered, and memory, once buried, burns to return. The name most often repeated among the desert elders is Nefer Sakim, the beautiful power of fire. It is both a king's name and a place, a tomb for bodies that burn yet leave no ash. Whoever finds its gate, they say, will see a light no human eye can bear, a light not meant to illuminate, but to consume the soul into eternity. Ancient Ptolemaic texts mention the tomb without shadow west of Thebes, perhaps the same place. Its fire is not of the earth, and its light gives no life. That line inspired centuries of theories about the fire mummies. Eternal keepers who chose burning as devotion, not punishment. To burn was to serve forever. But as time passed, devotion decayed into curse. When the kingdom perished, their fire lost purpose, becoming wild and restless. Those once loyal guardians turned into wandering spirits, seeking meaning in their endless blaze. Some legends say that once every 1,000 years, one of them rises to the surface, wearing human form, searching for someone brave enough to face the fire and not burn. And perhaps, as the desert elders say, Whitcomb and Layla were not seekers of the tomb at all, but souls the tomb itself had called. The desert wind blew softly that night, carrying grains of sand that felt like cold ash clinging to the skin. There was no sound except the whisper of air moving between the stones, as if the world had stopped breathing. Far in the distance, the moon hung low, silver glow reflecting faintly on the surface of the sand that looked like a frozen sea. Out of the darkness, a shape began to emerge, something not born of nature. As the eyes adjusted, the contours became clear, not sand, not natural rock, but something built by human hands thousands of years ago. There it stood, half buried under time's weight, the entrance to Nefer Sechem, the tomb said to hold the fire mummies. There was no grand gate, no statues like those guarding the pyramids. Only a wall of stone, human high, with a narrow crack at the center that breathed faint heat. Around it, the sand was fused into glass-like crusts, forming rings like marks left by burning coals. Lila knelt, shining her flashlight, revealing smooth, blackish-red glass beneath the sand. "This isn't just rock," Whitcomb murmured. He touched it and pulled back quickly. "It's hot." The air was freezing, yet the stone pulsed with warmth. They stood there, silent, staring at the fissure, exhaling soft heat like a sleeping creature. Above them, stars glittered cold and distant, but from within the crack came a faint red glow, pulsing slowly like the heart of the earth. No flicker, no movement, just a steady rhythm. The desert felt alive. They dug around the structure, uncovering carvings spiraling toward a single red stone shaped like an eye. It glowed faintly. Below it, hieroglyphs read, "The place where fire does not die." The air shifted. From inside came a whisper, not sand, but many voices speaking at once. Then silence. They crawled in. The warmth wrapped them like breath. The walls inside gleamed black and clean, free of dust. Their footsteps echoed, then multiplied as if something deeper walked in rhythm with them. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber where faceless figures carved into the stone reached upward, half their bodies aflame. At the center stood a pillar of black stone, veined with red, surrounded by open coffins. Inside lay the mummies, preserved, yet coated in a deep red resin, as though they had burned without turning to ash. Whitcomb felt awe and dread at once. It was not just a tomb, it was a presence, patient and breathing, waiting through millennia for someone to finally come close enough to see. The chamber felt like the belly of the earth, still keeping its ancient embers alive. The heat moved slowly, like the breath of something not living yet, not dead. The flashlight beams made the mummy's shadows seem to move, breathing softly. Lila studied one mummy, coated in glossy red resin. Its eyes were closed, thin streaks of black soot trailing down. As she approached, warm air thickened around her. From the mummy's mouth came a faint exhalation, smelling of scorched metal. They froze. The scent lingered, resin, blood, and drowned fire. The walls seemed to breathe, echoing their voices with soft sighs. Whitcomb checked his thermometer. 43 degrees. Impossible for an underground site. The red veins of the stone walls were hot, while the lighter parts were cool like living flesh. On the west wall, they found carvings showing figures holding unlit torches circling a man with a radiant sun for a head. The inscription read, the sealed fire. Flesh burned, but not destroyed. The king who sleeps in heat. At the center of the floor lay a blackened circle with a sun symbol, surrounded by dried metallic stains. When Whitcomb tapped it, the sound was hollow. A breath of heat escaped the cracks, followed by a red pulse deep below. The chamber fell silent. The air grew hotter. The mummy's resin softened, releasing golden droplets down the walls. "It's like they're waking up," Whitcomb whispered. The central mummy was different, covered in black resin, with a small bronze sun on its chest. From beneath it glowed a red vein pulsing like a heartbeat. Lila touched the metal, and the room changed. Shadows twisted, as if stirred by invisible wind. The red glow brightened. A crack echoed above. Dust fell. Then silence again. But from beneath the floor, a thin red line spread, connecting to the central mummy's chest. Something was stirring, something that had been waiting for thousands of years. Whitcomb's voice broke the quiet. "We have to leave." Yet they both knew, which was already too late. They stood in silence, the air trembling faintly, as if the earth itself was breathing. Red light spread across the cracked floor like living veins, pulsing with faint whispers from the stone. Lila's camera fogged, unable to focus through the heavy, strange air. When Whitcomb touched the central stone, it pulsed like warm flesh. His fingers came away dusted in ash. "This isn't stone," he murmured. "It's resin mixed with metal frozen fire." The west wall carvings seemed to shift. The sun-headed figure leaned forward, its torches now appearing lit. From beneath the floor came a soft wind, smelling sweet and burnt, like honey and resin aflame. The mummy's resin began melting, dripping softly. A sarcophagus lid scraped open by itself. Another followed. The heat climbed past 50 degrees. No fire, yet everything glowed. The black mummy in the center cracked open, revealing deep red beneath, the bronze sun on its chest pulsing like a living heart. Air swirled around them, lifting dust and ancient cloth into a silent dance. The walls trembled with a voice buried in the stone. The red veins merged into a single bright core and then went dark. Silence, but one faint red light still beat at the center like a dying ember. Lila whispered, "Maybe it's not a curse, but a warning." Whitcomb replied, "Or a call for those who dare to listen." Behind them, unseen, a pair of ashen eyes opened slowly. Night descended upon the desert slowly, shrouding it in a faint heat haze. The air smelled of metal and burnt flowers. There were no stars, only the faint orange afterglow behind the pyramids. Near the excavation camp, workers sat quietly around a small fire, whispering as if afraid to be overheard. None dared look toward the dark hill where Lila and Whitcomb had gone earlier. Mahmoud, the oldest among them, held his worn prayer beads. "The smell of burning resin," he said. "It means they've awakened." The fire flickered strangely, bending toward the south, where the darkness seemed thicker than the rest. Layla and Whitcomb emerged from the cave, covered in ash. Behind them, the massive stone door sealed itself with a deep, echoing sound. As they walked back, the desert fell silent. Even the wind paused. Their footsteps left glowing red marks in the sand that refused to fade. At camp, Mahmud warned them that is not a tomb for men. But Lila couldn't speak. She heard whispers, steady, rhythmic, in a language older than breath itself. Whitcomb sat unmoving by the fire, pulse racing, his eyes fixed on the dark hill. "They're not dead," he murmured, "only waiting." A sudden hot wind roared, extinguishing the flames. The desert rumbled beneath their feet. Leela looked up to see flashes of red light in the clouds. Whitcomb rose, entranced, whispering, "They're calling." He walked toward the hill, leaving glowing footprints behind. Lila shouted, but the wind swallowed her voice. A red glow appeared where the tomb lay buried. Mahmud dropped his beads. "The curse lives," he whispered. "Their fire never dies." Below, the burned mummy's eyes opened again. Faint red light flickering like the breath of an old god returning. The next night, Leela's tent was the only one still lit in the motionless desert. The workers had fled, refusing payment. Alone, she unrolled the ancient linens, revealing symbols written in dark red inks, some resembling tongues of flame, others eyes that never closed. The ink shimmered faintly, glowing from within the fabric. When she shut her eyes, she saw orange light flickering behind her eyelids. A soft breathing came from the corner of the tent. "Whitcomb," she whispered, but no one answered. From the shadows, a tall figure emerged, its eyes faintly red, its form flickering like smoke. The air grew hot as the voice spoke, deep and distant. "The fire never killed them. It fed them. You opened the path sealed for 1,000 years." Leela's memories returned: the burning chamber, the ash, the mummified figure that refused to crumble. The tomb was not a grave, but a shrine. The fire was not destruction, but preservation. The shadow faded as her oil lamp sputtered and went dark. Outside, the desert glowed faintly red, as if the sands themselves had begun to breathe. Tiny embers drifted through the air. Lila looked at her hands. They burned from within. Beneath her skin, faint red veins pulsed like rivers of flame. In her mind, the whisper grew clearer. Fire is not the end. It is the beginning. She collapsed to the floor, trembling as the sands outside swirled into a vast, living spiral, moving toward the buried tomb. Deep beneath the earth, the burned mummy opened its mouth. A hiss escaped, and the walls lit up one by one with ancient fire. Lila had been marked by something far older than she could understand. The next dawn came without color. The sky was a dull golden gray, and the dunes seemed to pulse, as though something beneath them was breathing. Layla stood outside her tent, her skin still glowing faintly with warmth. In the distance, faint figures moved across the sand shapes of men who left no footprints, their steps igniting tiny sparks before fading. Inside her tent, the map on the wall had changed. The red mark where the tomb lay now throbbed faintly, as if alive. When she touched it, she heard a slow, deep breathing beneath the earth. The mark pulsed to her heartbeat. On her hand, the red symbol had deepened now, a full circle of flame, resembling the ancient solar disk of Egyptian temples. When she wrote in her notebook, the ink turned red and began to glow, the letters shifting, forming the same circle from her skin. Smoke rose from the pages, shaping Whitcomb's face. "Leela," it whispered, "they've marked us. They don't want us to leave." Outside, the desert moved like water. Waves of sand flowed toward the western hill. Above, a spiral of thin clouds formed, with a glowing center that pulsed with the earth below. Lila stood still, watching as the dunes shimmered like a sea of fire. "If this is a curse," she whispered, "then it was born not from hate, but from a memory that refuses to die." Then the sky rumbled, deep and distant, like the awakening of the earth itself. Night arrived without dusk or dawn, fading light until the desert drowned in dull bronze. The remaining archaeologists grew pale and restless. Shadows moved outside their tents, and beasts died without wounds, their bodies still warm. The air smelled faintly of burning cloth. Lila wrote in her journal. The heat, she noted, did not come from the sun or earth, but from something deep beneath the tomb. 3 of the 5 mummies had turned to ash without flame. The other 2 still pulsed faintly under their wrappings. When she stepped outside, the hill glowed faintly red. Beneath the sand, she heard not wind, but chanting ancient, wordless, monotonous. The ground shimmered and formed a glowing symbol she recognized, the mark of eternal fire. Carved above the stone sarcophagus. From the red haze, a dark figure emerged, its body half smoke, half ember. Its voice entered her mind. "You awakened what should have slept," it said. "A curse is not punishment. It is memory. We burned to remember." Visions filled her eyes' temples, priests immolating themselves, a lost city burning without flame. When she reopened her eyes, the vision was gone. Only warm sand remained, glowing faintly. She returned to her tent, wrote one final line. "Fire does not punish. It remembers." And outside, the desert continued to breathe. Days after that night, whispers came from the north. In the small riverside village of Kurat el Hawa, strange things began to happen. Fire flickered on walls without lamps. Shadows danced with no light to cast them. People called it the Fire of the Guardians. A child named Amira saw a spiral of red sand glowing outside her window. A whisper spoke, "We awaken. We remember." Days later, her fever broke, but her eyes began to glow faintly orange in the dark. Lila visited her, and the moment she met the child's eyes, she recognized that same light from the tomb. The girl whispered, "They told me to guard." Soon, the Nile itself shimmered red. Fishermen felt the warmth in the water and saw fleeting faces beneath the surface. Fire appeared in the wheat fields, not burning, but glowing, breathing. People believed the ancient priests had returned, walking among them to ensure the living remembered what had been sealed. That night, Lila sat by the river, eyes closed, hearing the voice again, soft and eternal. "We are not dead. We burned so the world would remember." In the following days, silence grew heavy over Kurat el Hawa. Lila began noticing strange signs among the children, faint, glowing veins, spiral drawings on the ground, whispers in their sleep. They spoke of the fire that remembers. She inspected their pulses and saw the faint red glow beneath their skin. It was as if the curse had turned into a living memory, carried in blood. At night, distant lights moved across the desert like unseen processions. The children called themselves the keepers of the fire's shadow. Even Leela's reflection changed. Her eyes faintly shimmered with the same glow. One evening, she found the children singing in a forgotten tongue around an unlit torch. The air trembled with ancient rhythm. Amira raised her hand and said softly, "They never left, only changed form." From the dunes came a red breath of light. The ancient seal stirred again. Lila wrote her final note that night. Perhaps not a curse, but a cycle. Not wrath, but remembrance. Fire burns, but it also guides the lost home. As she closed her journal, a tiny spark flickered on her fingers, warm, gentle, and alive. The next morning, Leela followed the footprints westward into the desert. She found half-buried ruins, their stones scarred by fire long ago. Touching the walls, she uncovered carvings of figures crowned by flame, calm, reverent, and unafraid. Within a narrow passage, she found a chamber where the air was cool and dense. On the wall, a faint image of a woman holding a dying torch caught her eye. Below it, the words read, "The first keeper, bearer of the fire's memory." The resemblance to her own face sent a shiver through her. She lit incense, sat quietly, and listened. The silence turned into a breath, then into rhythm. In her mind, she saw a city burning, yet the flames guided souls free rather than consuming them. Perhaps the curse had never been punishment, but a kind of remembering. When she touched the wall again, a spark traced the spiral symbol beneath her hand, glowing softly. It did not burn. It recognized her. Leela left the temple as the sky shifted above her, clouds swirling like silent watchers. She walked home slowly, carrying a quiet fire inside her heart. When Lila returned to the village, the air carried a different stillness. The smell of incense floated, though no one had lit any. Children played quietly, their laughter pausing in strange rhythm, as if something unseen watched gently. An old man sat with eyes closed, lips whispering softly. When he looked at her, his eyes glowed faint gold, calm and unafraid. At home, Lila found her mother stirring water in a clay bowl. The surface shimmered with faint light. "They're not angry anymore," her mother murmured. Layla touched the water. It pulsed warmly, alive like a quiet heart beneath the earth. That night, villagers gathered around a small fire. No one spoke. The flames burned softly, their glow reflected in every gaze. Fear had left them. The curse had dissolved into something gentler, a rhythm between breath and sand. Lila looked toward the horizon where the desert shimmered like distant water. The ruins still waited, eternal and patient. She understood now that the fire was memory, not punishment. Perhaps every soul here was a keeper of that ancient flame. As the wind carried dust in small spirals, she closed her eyes and listened. The hum from beneath the ground became a song, unending and calm. The fire flickered, and within its light, she saw the faint image of the torch-bearing woman's smile before fading into the wind. Weeks after the night of fire, whispers began to spread. Not through traders or letters, but carried by the wind and echoed in conversations of strangers. They spoke of a place where fire did not burn and mummies did not sleep. The village of Quiet Flame. Among those who heard was Alaric, a wandering historian. He learned of it from an old woman in a Cairo market who whispered, "There is a place where the sand sings, and light is not born from the sun." Drawn by those words, he traveled into the desert. The journey was silent. The dunes shifted like tides. The stars seemed near enough to touch. When he finally saw the village, he could not tell if it was real. The air was warm and fragrant with resin. A golden flame glowed gently at the center, calm, alive, breathing. The villagers did not fear him. Layla greeted him quietly and asked, "You came because you heard them, didn't you?" He said nothing, for it was true he had heard voices from the sand at night. At the edge of the village, the sand pulsed faintly beneath their feet. Lila whispered, "This isn't fire. It's their breath. They burned long ago, but now they breathe through the earth." Alaric replied softly, "Then they are not dead." Lila answered, "No, but they are not alive either." That night, he dreamed of faces beneath the dunes, silent, waiting. When he awoke, ash lay on his skin, faintly fragrant. He knew then that he had entered a story that would never release him. The next morning, Alaric explored the village's edge. Beneath the sand, he discovered ancient carvings, not hieroglyphs, but strange curving lines resembling flames flanked by two staring eyes. Below, a half-burned, half-human figure was etched into stone. He noted a fire that unites two realms. Leela appeared silently. "It's not a symbol of fire," she said softly. "It's the breath of souls. When the body burns, the spirit doesn't ascend. It merges with the ground, keeping this place alive." He asked who they were. She replied simply, "Those buried beneath us. The nameless king, the guardian of flame." Days of digging revealed no bodies, no tombs, only stones forming a spiral downward. On the seventh day, Alaric uncovered a glowing ring of ash. The ash pulsed faintly, as if breathing. When he reached out to touch it, Lila stopped him. "If you touch it, you become part of it." That night, the villagers lit gentle fires, a silent ritual under the wind. In the flickering glow, Alaric saw shadows standing within the dunes, not ghosts, but memories refusing to die. Then a whisper brushed his ear, calm and final. "You have found it. But you must never open the flame." He turned, but nothing was there. Only the quiet desert breathing beneath the stars. Night after night, Alaric lost the line between dream and waking. In his dreams, a long corridor of red-lit stone always led to a throne. Upon it sat a figure veiled in golden soot, breathing out silent fire. The figure never spoke, yet Alaric felt its thoughts inside his own mind. He woke to find the ash had shifted overnight into the same spiral scene in the ancient carvings. Touching it, he felt a faint, living warmth. Lila joined him, murmuring, "He knows you're here." Fire does not like to be seen. She explained that the Fire King lived through remembrance. Each thought of him rekindled his flame. That night, the king in his dream opened his eyes, glowing like embers. When Alaric awoke, he saw flames rising from the excavation ring. They did not burn. They moved like living water, forming the king's face before fading into the wind. Villagers watched in silence. An old man gave Alaric a small amulet marked with an eye and circle of flame. "To protect you from what wakes," he said, then left. As days passed, the ash seemed to breathe each time Alaric wrote. The whispers in the sand grew clearer, almost words. He began to believe the tomb was not a resting place, but a heart still beating beneath the earth. When he finished writing one night, the ground sighed, and warm air rose through the dunes as if the desert itself had remembered how to breathe. The days blurred together, the desert losing its sense of time. The amulet grew warm each time Alaric neared the circle of ash. At night, it swung by itself, slowly turning, as if keeping a rhythm only it knew. He dreamed again of linen-wrapped figures walking in circles, their eyes lit by tiny flames. From within their ranks rose the Fire King, speaking in a voice that came not from the air, but from Alaric's chest. Fire does not die. It waits. When forgotten, it calls again. He woke to find the amulet pulsing with life. The ash outside had formed into the shape of an eye. Lila arrived pale and quiet, whispering, "They have begun to speak. Those who burned never rest." Each time their names are remembered, a spark returns. That night, shadowed figures walked the dunes, leaving trails of ember. Their eyes glowed faint red, like memories refusing to fade. By dawn, they were gone, leaving only faint scorch marks. Alaric wrote in his journal, "They are not from the past. Fire ends nothing. It only delays its burning." The next day, Lela disappeared. Villagers told him she had been called by the flame. Alaric began to understand that his work was no longer about history. The desert breathed, alive with something ancient that listened when he spoke. When he whispered the word fire, a tiny flame flickered between his fingers, gentle, fleeting, as if it belonged to him. That night, he looked at his glowing amulet and realized it was no longer protection. It was a key. But he did not yet dare to ask what door it might open. That night stretched endlessly, as if time itself was holding its breath. Alaric sat before a small fire that he had kindled not with a spark or match, but with his own breath. The flame grew from grains of sand, blooming like a quiet flower under the stars. The air trembled gently, and faint whispers rose from beneath the ground. The amulet pulsed in rhythm with the fire's glow, alive in its silence. He removed the chain from his neck, feeling the metal's strange weight. On the back, faint carvings appeared, circles and lines converging toward a small sealed point. Compelled by an unknown urge, he pressed a knife against it. A faint hiss escaped, like a breath freed after centuries. From within, a glowing ember emerged, soft golden red, refusing to fade even upon touching sand. Then came a voice, deep and distant. "You have opened what should remain sealed." The fire rose and shaped itself into a vague human form made of smoke and light. "I am the flame guarded by time," it said. "I burned to awaken the sun when men forgot. You have opened the path between worlds." Alaric whispered, trembling, "Who are you?" The figure replied slowly, "I am the king of unending fire, the breath of those sacrificed so the world might remain bright. You carry my spark, and through you they will be remembered." The desert outside glowed faintly red. The figure stepped closer, leaving trails of ember that refused to die. The forgotten burn not in anger, but in longing. To be remembered is to rise again, and then as swiftly as it had come. The flame vanished, leaving behind a single pulse of light within the amulet. When Alaric looked closer, he saw it, a tiny eye forming inside the metal, glowing softly, watching him. The wind died. The stars shimmered strangely, and one red star pulsed brighter than the rest. That night, he knew the boundary between dream and waking was gone. Fire was within him now, and the desert, once silent, had begun to breathe again. The next night, the desert air was heavy, pressing against the chest like a silent weight. Alaric sat before his tent, no fire burning this time. The amulet's faint orange glow was enough to light the sand around him. Inside it, something moved a slow, shifting eye of light that seemed to see beyond the present world. When he touched it, his vision trembled. The desert faded, replaced by a vast, ancient valley. A shining river cut through the land, palm trees lined its banks, and golden temples gleamed under the sun. He saw people in white robes carrying clay jars filled with glowing ash, walking toward a tall, burning tower. The fire atop it never ceased. At the base stood an old priest before a swirling flame. His voice, echoing inside Alaric's mind, said, "Fire is the memory of the world. Without it, no name endures." The priest lifted ash from a stone bowl and scattered it to the air, where it turned into countless stars. The people wept quietly beneath them, united by the warmth within their chests. But soon, black smoke rose in the east. Figures in dark robes came with jars of black water, pouring it upon the sacred flame. Each drop screamed as it died. The vision broke. When Alaric awoke, the desert was still. The amulet was cold, but he could still smell the faint sweetness of burnt wood. In the distance, a whisper floated through the wind. "Do not let the flame die again." He sat silently, realizing that what he had seen was no illusion. It was a message of memory of a forgotten world asking to be remembered once more. The next morning came with a silver sky, calm but uneasy. Alaric woke to a strange heaviness in the air. The vision still lingered in his mind. When he stepped outside, he noticed faint lines in the sand. If something ancient had moved there recently. The dunes were scattered with fragments of warm black stone, smooth and layered, as though melted long ago. He realized they were not mere stones, but remnants of the eternal flame itself. Far ahead, he found a half-buried structure, massive, unnatural in shape. Its surface bore carvings worn by time, the same symbol engraved on his amulet, an eye surrounded by tongues of fire. As he traced it with his hand, the wind shifted and began to whisper words he did not fully know, yet somehow understood. The name Amnet-Ra came forth, heavy and sacred. When he repeated it aloud, the ground stirred. A glowing pattern formed beneath him, dust swirling into light. The air grew warmer, shimmering gold for a heartbeat. The name was not just a word, was a key. He placed the amulet at the center of the drawn circle, and a faint image emerged in the air, the burning tower flickering between memory and dream. Then she appeared, a woman in crimson robes, her eyes dark and endless. Her voice was soft, older than time. "The fire has not died," she said, "but it is no longer pure." She looked at the amulet with sorrow. "We once guarded the flame until men poured their black water upon it. You have brought it back. Now you must see what it became." Her hand reached toward him. When their fingers met, the world dissolved into darkness, and within that darkness, sparks began to awaken one by one, like stars returning to life. In the darkness that surrounded him, Alaric lost all sense of his body. From the swirling embers rose a Vizhuna city of light and dust, built on glowing rivers, its towers carved from black stone that reflected the eternal flame. The priests walked silently, torches of blue fire in hand. At the heart of the city stood the altar, alive and burning. The woman's voice echoed beside him, calm and mournful. "This is Amnet Ratha, city of flame. They sought immortality through fire, but every light demands a price." He saw the king, crowned in red stone, lift his hands toward the heavens. Fire roared upward, touching the sky. The people worshipped in trembling awe. From the fire rose a figure shaped like a man but hollow, burning from within. Smoke fell like ash from his body. Then the priests began to change. Their flesh blackened. They stood motionless, their eyes glowing faintly as their souls slipped away. The city burned. Buildings melted, the molten river overflowed, and the screams turned to silence. Yet the altar's flame burned on steady, alive, cursed. "They never died," the woman whispered. "They burn forever. And whenever their rest is disturbed, they awaken again." Alaric realized the curse had spread through time. The fire had escaped binding itself to relics, to the sands, perhaps even to people. It was the reason mummies burned without cause, the reason the desert still breathed warmth at night. The name he spoke, Amnet Ra, had called it once more. The vision faded. He stood again beneath the sun, holding the amulet that pulsed with living light. The fire had remembered him. The desert wind carried fine grains of glowing sand beneath the sun. In his hand, the amulet pulsed softly alive, warm, impossible to release. Beneath his feet, the sand shimmered faintly red, as if embers slept beneath the dunes. A whisper filled the air, low and rhythmic, like the breathing of something ancient. Returning to his camp, Alaric found everything covered in fine black ash. His notes, his tent, even the water stained as if by fire that left no flame. Inside the tent stood the woman again, her body outlined in dim red light. Her lips moved, though her voice came only in his mind. "You have awakened their fire again." She dissolved into glowing dust, absorbed by the amulet in his palm. And then, far across the desert, thin red lines began to appear beneath the sand, branching outward like veins of fire. From each point, small flares rose, floating in silence. Alaric watched in stillness as the desert shimmered with 1,000 quiet flames. He knew then that something lost had returned, that the sands now held a living fire. The voice came once more, calm and final. Every flame needs a keeper. You are its guardian now. He closed his eyes and the fire circled him, wrapping the world in an endless, silent glow. Night arrived without stars. The desert, once silver under the moon, was now veiled in a red mist that swirled slowly like scorched breath. Alaric stood in the midst of it, the red amulet glowing brighter than ever. Each pulse of light rippled through the sand, and from those ripples, shapes began to rise: walls, arches, and broken pillars, forming outlines of something vast. He realized, with a quiet awe, that the city was returning, emerging from beneath the earth like a buried memory reborn. Stone buildings rose from the sand, reassembling themselves as if time were reversing. Black stone streets stretched open between dunes, carrying faint echoes of footsteps and whispers from long ago. Above him, the red light coiled into a dome, sealing the sky. There were no stars, only the silent dance of flame. Alaric walked forward, the glow of the amulet reflecting in his eyes, lighting the path into a city alive yet empty. Statues lined the street's ancient sentinels with cracked faces and eyes that shimmered faintly as if newly awakened. Between them, he heard a sound, a low chant, not of human origin, a harmony woven of countless voices merging into one endless tone. It was not a song, but a remembrance. The amulet in his hand began to change. The stone now looked like molten ember, spiraling with moving light. He felt it pulling him toward the center, toward the heart of the fire. At the center of the city stood a great temple, its gates towering like twin spires. Above them, a symbol of an eye within a circle, the same as carved on the ruins he had first explored. The gates opened on their own, and a wave of hot air brushed his face, carrying the scent of scorched stone. Without hesitation, he stepped inside. As Alaric crossed the threshold of the temple, the air grew heavy and alive. The walls were made of black, glassy stone, reflecting his image with strange distortions. On one side, he appeared young and frightened. On the other, old and hollow-eyed. Each footstep echoed endlessly, as if sound itself traveled through another layer of time. In the center stood an altar carved with flames and eyes, its top split open, radiating a thick red light not blinding, but piercing his mind like a memory that refuses to fade. Around the altar towered 6 statues, each dressed as an ancient Egyptian priest. Their faces had been scorched away, yet the aura that surrounded them felt alive, intensely so. Alaric felt his chest tighten, as if the air itself denied him breath. Slowly, he knelt, not from fear, but from the deep instinct that this was not a place where men should stand proud. The whispering returned, clearer now. The words belonged to an ancient tongue he did not understand, but the rhythm was that of a prayer recited for millennia. He heard his name being spoken in Alaric, echoing softly from all directions before falling into silence. Then, the fire within the altar began to change color from red to orange to gold and finally to blinding white. Within that light, something stirred. A figure, shaped like a human, but made entirely of fire and shadow, the form of a burning mummy. The being did not walk. It drifted. Every movement left a shimmer of heat in the air. Its face was blank, with only 2 points of light for eyes. When it opened its mouth, there was no sound, only waves of heat that cracked the altar stones. Alaric understood instantly that he was standing before the guardian of Flame, the warden of the cursed desert kings. He tried to step back, but his feet refused to move. The amulet in his hand trembled violently, and from it emerged a beam of light, linking him to the creature. Then, the shadows on the walls came alive, replaying fragments of the past burial ceremonies surrounded by flames. Priests screaming as they burned, and a crimson sky closing over the doomed city. All swirled around him like a fever dream. And in that moment, he knew the fire was not a symbol of power, but of erasure. Every king buried here was burned not to be honored, but to be erased, to cleanse the world of their sins. Yet the curse backfired, binding their souls in eternal flame, turning them into mummies of fire that would never rest. The fire atop the altar began to swirl slowly, forming a vertical vortex that looked like a miniature sun in the temple's darkness. The temperature rose sharply, yet Alaric felt no pain, only a deep, pressing warmth, as if burdened by an ancient longing. From within the vortex came a long, resonant chant, a harmony of many voices speaking in unison. It was neither threatening nor gentle, just calm, detached, like a sentence passed long ago. They spoke names unfamiliar to him, names erased from history, and with each name uttered, a spark broke free from the flames. Falling to the ground and turning into drifting black dust around him, he tried to understand the words. Though the language was ancient, meaning began to form in his mind. These were not just spirits, they were memories. They spoke of betrayals among kings, of rituals trading souls for power, of cities' sacrifice to preserve one man's immortality. They called the curse the Covenant of Fire, a ritual meant to bury sin within eternal flame. But what is hidden never truly disappears. Then came the strange realization. One of the names they spoke sounded eerily close to his own. He peered into the vortex, and beyond the shifting fire, he saw the figure of a man dressed as a pharaoh, wearing a crown of living flame. The face was hard to discern, yet its features mirrored Alaric's perfectly. The figure opened its eyes, and beams of white light streamed from them. A voice echoed not in his ears, but deep within his chest. It spoke with calm authority. You have returned to fulfill the promise left undone. The world began to tremble. The priest statues moved slowly, lifting their hands toward the fire, tongues of flame flickering from the cracks in their stone fingers, forming a glowing circle above Alaric's head. He tried to look away, but the light held him. Then came Vision's rituals in the same chamber, brighter and crowded with hundreds of priests surrounding a king to be burned alive. The king stood motionless in the blaze, neither screaming nor begging, only gazing skyward with a faint smile. And then Alaric understood the king had his face. He was witnessing himself in another lifetime. The fire devouring the king's body reached across time and touched his soul now. The chant rose, blending into one relentless phrase. The fire does not punish, it remembers. The light grew until everything turned white. When his sight returned, he was no longer in the temple. He stood in the middle of a vast desert beneath a crimson sky. Before him loomed a colossal stone tomb. Its door opened, and from within came the slow, deliberate sound of footsteps. Something ancient waking after centuries. He gripped the amulet tightly, but it turned to ash in his hand, carried away by the wind. And from the darkness of the tomb emerged the Desert King, wearing Alaric's own face, with eyes burning in eternal white fire. The desert wind drifted softly, carrying the scent of scorched metal and burned sand that clung to the air like a bitter memory. Alaric stood motionless before the figure that looked exactly like himself older. Quieter, eternal. The white fire in the figure's eyes did not flicker, only trembled gently whenever the wind passed. Between them stretched a sacred silence, as though time itself had paused to witness the reunion of two halves of the same soul. Under the fading light, their shadows merged into one long shape over the sand, indistinguishable where one began and the other ended. Alaric tried to speak, but no sound came. His throat was dry, his tongue felt made of dust. The figure stepped closer with silent, weightless steps, radiating a warmth that soothed rather than burned. When only a few paces separated them, the figure raised a glowing hand and placed it on Alaric's chest. A surge of light flowed through him, enveloping his entire body. In an instant, fragments of the past flashed before his eyes. He saw a sand palace by the Nile, long reduced to ruins. He saw ceremonies where priests bowed before an untouchable king, and he knew, somehow, that he was that king. He saw his own hand signing execution orders, heard the cries of those who suffered under his command, and the wind of the desert carried their echoes into his mind. The memories flowed into him like water seeping through stone, slowly drowning what he thought he knew about himself. The Desert King's voice rose again, not from without, but from within Alaric's chest, as if his own heart spoke. "You lit the fires," it said. "You commanded the flame, and now the flame comes to reclaim its due." Alaric trembled not in fear, but in recognition. The legends of burning mummies, the tales of eternal curses, they were not about others. They were about him. He was not the discoverer, not the historian, not the observer of the past. He was the past itself, a soul bound to a fire that never died. The king turned toward the open tomb. A soft red glow emanated from within, not from torches, but from the air itself. The king stepped slowly to the threshold and looked back once, eyes still bright but now calm, as if finally at peace. He raised his hand, inviting. Without knowing why, Alaric followed. Beyond that door was not darkness, but something deeper, something that had called to him across dreams and centuries. Each step felt like walking through his own memory. Inside, the sound of fire was soft, almost like a lullaby. The weight in his chest lifted, replaced by an unfamiliar ease. When he reached the king's side, they stood together beneath stone pillars carved with flames. The king spoke once more, his voice barely a whisper. "Every flame carries its own shadow. You may let it fade or walk beside it. Then his eyes dimmed, turning into drifting ash. His body cracked, crumbling piece by piece, leaving behind only a small heap of white dust. Alaric watched the ashes long and silent. The glow in the tomb faded, blending with the twilight outside. He felt warmth not from fire, but from quiet acceptance. When he finally stepped out, the desert had changed. The wind was still, the sky deep blue, and in the distance, beyond the dunes, a faint shimmer like water reflected the last light of day. Somehow, he knew his journey was not over, but the night was ready to close this chapter in peace. As Alaric walked away from the tomb, the sand beneath his feet seemed to change. It was no longer cold and dry, but warm like the earth itself was breathing softly below him. He stopped, looking up at the sky now painted in deep purples and fading orange. On the horizon, the sun had vanished completely, leaving behind a thin streak of light like an open wound between earth and sky. In that silence, Alaric began to understand. What he had just experienced was not the end of a story, but the repetition of one that had happened countless times before. He looked down at his hands still dusty, yet faintly glowing beneath the skin, like embers refusing to die. In his chest, something pulsed gently, not fear, not life, but a distant echo that called to him across centuries. A cycle, he whispered to himself. This curse isn't punishment, it's balance. Once he had lit the flame for power, and it consumed him. Now, that same flame lived within him, not to destroy, but to preserve. He realized that every creature, every kingdom, every buried secret has its own unseen guardian souls who exist between the folds of time, ensuring that the old is never lost, only transformed. And now he was one of them. His steps carried him up to higher ground, where the wind was stronger. Among ancient stones carved with forgotten symbols, he saw it. A small fire, floating in the air with no fuel, waiting. He sat before it. There was no prayer, no incantation, only stillness, and breathing that slowly matched the rhythm of the desert. The flame swayed, mimicking his breath, until the two moved as one, fusing into a single light within his chest. When night finally descended, the desert fell silent. No birds, no wind, only Alaric, sitting in the vast sea of blackened sand that now shone like glass. From afar, the stars hung lower than ever before, their reflections glimmering across his calm face. For the first time, he felt that time itself no longer moved forward. He was at the point where beginnings and endings ceased to matter. He closed his eyes slowly. In that darkness, a whisper rose not from the world, but from within him. Every flame is a memory. Every shadow is a guardian. Do not extinguish, only transform. And when he opened his eyes, the desert was gone. When Alaric's awareness returned, he was no longer in the vast desert. The air around him was heavier, with a strange scent, a mixture of stone dust, old iron, and something that could only be called time. He opened his eyes slowly and saw not the sky, but a ceiling flat, pale white, with cracks shaped like rivers on an ancient map. Around him were unfamiliar objects, glass, metal, and light that did not come from fire. He sat up, realizing that his body remained the same, but the world had shifted thousands of years ahead. He was inside a cold, silent room. A faint hum came from a machine in the corner, and the walls were covered with markings he could not read. Before him stood something that made his chest tighten, a large glass coffin. Inside, it lay a charred, yet intact body. A mummy, golden skin cracked, empty eyes staring up at the sterile ceiling. Below the case, a small plaque read words he didn't understand, but somehow he knew their meaning. The burned pharaoh circa 1400 BC. Tomb unknown. Alaric stood and stared at the body for a long time. He recognized his own face, trapped between time and fire. A gentle echo stirred in his mind, the same whisper he had heard in the desert. Every flame is a memory. Every shadow a guardian. He smiled faintly, not out of joy, but understanding. He was no longer a man bound by the past. He was a keeper of memory, living among dead relics and the uncomprehending gaze of those who studied them. Footsteps echoed from afar, steady, deliberate, metallic. A young woman appeared in the doorway, wearing a long white coat, her hair neatly tied, a small notebook in hand. She froze when she saw Alaric standing before the mummy. Her expression shifted from confusion to fear, to uncertainty whether he was even real. "Sir, you can't be here," she whispered softly. But Alaric only looked at her with a calmness that no living human could hold. She blinked once, and in that instant, he was gone, dissolved like smoke in wind. Heart pounding, she approached the glass coffin and gasped. The mummy seemed different. Around its chest, faint light flickered, as if embers had come alive again. She pressed her hand to the glass and felt warmth beneath its chill. In silence, she scribbled a note in her book that perhaps, just perhaps, the ancient curse was not a myth. Far away, in the same desert that once devoured nameless kingdoms, the wind rose again. Among dunes shimmering under the moon, a small flame flickered to life. Not large, not hot, just a gentle spark hovering in the air, as if reminding the world that what once burned never truly dies. The night passed slowly, and to the modern world, nothing had changed. Yet between the thin layers of reality, time smiled. It knew that a new guardian had awakened, that the ancient fire still lived, passing from flesh to shadow, from desert to glass, from history to the dreams of those who tried to sleep. There was no ending, only transformation. And within that change, mystery continued to breathe, eternal as the sands that never cease to move. In the eternal silence, among the desert dust and the shadows of time, the legend of the guardian flame began to whisper again. No one knew when the tale first appeared, but the priests of ancient Egypt called it by a name long lost from sacred texts. Preserved only in spoken whispers, passed down through generations. They believed the flame was not merely fire, but the breath of the sun god, Ra, left upon the earth to preserve balance between life and death. It was said that the flame would ignite only for those who defied destiny or sought to open the gate to immortality. In Egypt's golden age, pharaohs ordered the flame to be kept in a hidden temple deep underground, far beneath a pyramid never mentioned in papyrus. The flame's guardians, known as the Children of Shadows, never appeared in public. From birth, they were trained to understand the meaning of light and darkness, taught that the world did not exist between two sides, but within countless layers. They knew that every flicker of fire held a memory, and every extinguished flame carried away a soul. On certain nights when Egypt's skies turned red, the guardian flame was said to sing. Its voice, soft and deep like wind brushing through stone, could make anyone who heard it feel as though the world had stopped spinning. The high priests would stand around it, eyes closed, speaking in a tongue now lost, one that even hieroglyphs could not capture. Within the flame, they saw faces of the long dead, heard whispers of pharaohs who ruled millennia ago, and smelled incense from funerals of forgotten kings. Some remaining records mention that the flame once went out during a time when the desert turned black with ash. When it vanished, the kingdom fell. The Nile ceased to flow for 3 days, and the sun seemed farther away. After that, the Egyptians believed no man could ever attempt to extinguish or rekindle the sacred fire without divine consent. For the flame was not a symbol, it was part of the cosmic consciousness that kept the world in balance. But time passed, and humanity forgot. The pyramids crumbled, temples turned to dust, and the last guardian disappeared with the desert wind. Modern archaeologists now unearth only shards of charred stone, red rocks that seem to hold heat within, and inscriptions no one can translate. None realize that beneath it all, embers still glow, the breath of Ra still lingers, waiting for a new soul bold enough to touch it. Alaric may not have been the first to find it, but he was the first to understand. The flame did not live only beneath pyramids or in temples, it lived within every human who looked to the sky with unending curiosity. Within the small fire in the human chest, between breath and awareness, a part of the guardian flame endures, reminding that even in the deepest darkness, something remains beyond time's reach. And perhaps that is why the burned mummy's chest stayed warm. Now, not from a curse nor chance, but because the guardian flame had found a new home. The body once burned, the soul once lost in desert, and now within the dreams of humans who think of Egypt as they drift to sleep. When night once again cloaked the Egyptian sky in a dark shade of blue, the guardians of the flame would gather in a circle of stone beneath the pyramid. No sound was permitted, only the whispers of steps and breaths that merged with the dry air. At the center, a small flame stood still, seemingly ordinary. Yet every guardian knew it was the threshold between the seen and the hidden worlds. That flame was the heart of an ancient funerary, rite one never recorded in papyrus, reserved only for those who had glimpsed death and returned to speak of it. They called the ritual the return of the light. When a pharaoh died, the priest would not prepare his body immediately. They would wait for a night when the sky was utterly dark, no stars, no wind. On that night, they lit the guardian flame and placed the ruler's body before it, surrounded by black stones carved in the shape of eyes. Within the fire, they believed the pharaoh's spirit would appear to gaze upon itself, and the flame would burn away the parts of his soul still bound to earth, freeing him to sail westward into the eternal fields promised by Osiris. Yet beneath the beauty of this rite lingered a quiet terror. Not all souls could depart this world. Some refused to release their lives, struggling against destiny even after their flesh turned cold. In such moments, the sacred fire would change color from deep red to blue-green, live and furious. It was said that when that happened, the mummy before it would ignite without flame, turn to ash without heat, as if burned by the wrath of heaven. That was the curse of the guardian flame, not one that struck the living, but one that burned the soul that defied death. Records from the New Kingdom mention this once occurred at the tomb of an unnamed pharaoh. When his body was laid before the flame, the chamber shook, and the priests fled, leaving the body to burn slowly until it became a shape of charcoal that stayed intact. After that night, the fire extinguished itself, and the pyramid where it happened was sealed forever. No one knows its location now, yet the legend survived in the secret chants of tomb keepers for thousands of years. Some modern archaeologists studying damaged papyri from Thebes found faint references to this ritual. They speculated that the flame might have been part of an aromatic burning system used for religious ceremonies. But what puzzled them was the recorded temperature was far beyond what any natural substance could produce. Stones around the tomb showed burn marks from within, not from without, as though energy had erupted from the rock itself. Scholars debate whether this is evidence of a lost, ancient technology or something beyond human explanation. Meanwhile, Egyptian mystics who still guard the old traditions believe the guardian flame is not an artifact, but a living entity. They say that every time a human remembers Egypt, the small flame trembles, responding to the collective memory of mankind. That every dream of pyramids, every imagination of mummies and tombs, is part of the subtle vibration keeping that flame alive, though the world has changed and new civilizations now rise upon its ruins. And perhaps, in a strange way, the ritual continues. No longer in temples or pyramids, but within the human consciousness that endlessly seeks the meaning of death. The flame now burns in stories, in music, in the voice that whispers tales of ancient Egypt as someone drifts into sleep. There, the return of the light endures eternal, unbroken, beyond the reach of time and flesh. In ancient Egyptian philosophy, the guardian flame was not merely a funerary element, was the symbol of undying consciousness. The priests called it Akh-en-Pet, or flame of the sky, a pure energy connecting mankind to the realm of the gods. When a person died, their body might decay, but the Akh continued to burn, guiding their spirit through the gates of darkness toward new life. This formed the foundation of their belief that there was no true death, only transformation from one form of light into another. Yet the high priests believed not every soul burned with equal strength. Those who lived consumed by greed or fear had a weak Akh, flickering like a candle in a storm. Such souls would wander aimlessly through the dark plains of Duat, searching for their guardian flame to return to the light. Conversely, the soul that lived in harmony with truth and balance, what they called Ma'at, would merge with the great celestial flame, becoming an eternal star. Thus, each night, when humans looked at the sky and saw the stars, they were, in essence, witnessing the souls that had found their way home. This symbolism was immortalized in carvings and funerary texts. On pyramid walls, one often finds the depiction of a person holding a torch amidst a sea of stars. The torch was not literal fire, but a representation of the Akh, glowing between worlds. Some texts even describe the journey vividly. When the sun sets in the west, the holy oak descends to greet the newly arrived and carry them to where the dawn never fades. A beautiful metaphor for life after death, a cycle without end between darkness and light. Interestingly, this concept became the root of many later spiritual symbols. The eternal flame, the candle at a grave. Even the modern association of light with the solal can be traced back to Egypt. The modern notion of immortal consciousness, of the spirit persisting after death, echoes Egyptian philosophy. It's as if that civilization never truly died, merely changed form. Like the guardian flame that keeps burning in human imagination, even now. Some modern symbolists claim that the guardian flame is a metaphor for collective memory, that humanity, unconsciously, keeps the flame alive each time it seeks meaning in death, or tries to understand existence itself. Every theory, every ritual, even every modern story of a pharaoh's curse is merely the same flame dancing between the seen and unseen worlds. And therein lies the tragic beauty of ancient Egypt, a lost civilization that still speaks in whispers that never fade. They may have been buried beneath sand and time, yet the light they ignited through pyramids, symbols, and stories continues to burn in the consciousness of the world, reminding us that nothing ever truly ends. In the deepest teachings of ancient Egypt, the human soul was not a single entity, but composed of delicate, interwoven layers. The priests called them Ka, Ba, Ak, Ren, Shuyet, Ib, and Sakim. Each had its own purpose, yet all worked together to form a complete being. The body was merely a vessel, a temporary home, where these layers resided until the time came for separation. Funerary texts, especially the Book of the Dead, described how at death these layers slowly drifted apart, seeking to reunite in the next world. Wholeness could only be achieved if the burial rituals were performed flawlessly, for even the smallest mistake could doom one layer to vanish forever. The first layer, Ca, was the life force bestowed at birth, a divine breath that allowed humans to move and think. When a person died, the Ka did not perish. It remained hungry, thirsty, waiting for offerings from the living. Hence, every tomb contains small chambers for food, drink, and incense, not mere symbols, but acts of love for a surviving spirit. If forgotten, the Ka would become restless, wandering and causing disturbances in the world of the living. Next was Ba, often depicted as a bird with a human head. It represented individuality and consciousness. The Ba could leave the tomb at night, visiting places once cherished, then return at dawn. An ancient prayer said, "O Ba, return before sunrise, so your body does not lose the soul that guides." For if the Ba failed to return, the body and spirit would be forever divided. Above all was Ak, the pure light achieved after all trials. Only the righteous could attain this stage. The Oki no longer needed a body, hunger, or thirst. It became part of the celestial stars, united with the sun god Ra, who carried daylight across the heavens. This was the final perfection, soul illuminated without end, free from the cycle of life and death. Yet not all souls reached it. There was Shuyet, the shadow bound to the body like a reflection on sand. It recorded every action, good or evil, and revealed them in the underworld. There was also Ren, the true name guarded by the god Thoth. As long as the name was spoken, one never truly died. Thus, every tomb was adorned with inscriptions of names carved in stone to ensure eternal remembrance. I, the heart, was the seat of thought and morality. During judgment before Osiris, the heart was weighed against the feather of Mat. If balanced, the soul was freed. If heavy with sin, it was devoured by Ammit, the eater of souls. Sekhem was the final force, the spiritual power binding all layers into one consciousness. It was like an invisible fire, uniting body, spirit, and name into a single eternal vibration. To the ancient Egyptians, to understand the soul was to understand the cosmos. They believed every star in the night sky was the Akh of a perfected soul. Every shadow on the earth, every whisper of wind across a tomb, was the Shuyet and Ka still waiting, still guarding the border between life and death. Nothing truly ended. Only forms changed. Only light shifted from one world to another, moving gently like a breath that never ceased. In the stillness of the temple night, the high priests performed a ritual known as Pere Piru, the ceremony of calling the spirit and purifying the fragmented soul. The ritual was not meant to disturb the peace of the dead, but to ensure that all layers of the soul could reunite before crossing the final gate. Beneath the dim flicker of torches, incense smoke rose like mist carrying prayers. While around the altar, sacred hieroglyphs were carved into the walls by hands trained over decades. They did not write mere prayers, but mantras that could only be recited with steady breath and a clean heart. For every tone and vibration was believed to open the path for the Ba to rediscover its Ka, for the Ren to reignite within its divine name. The ritual was always performed at night, when the sky was silent and the stars reflected like small fires upon the Nile surface. The priests called this time the moment between breaths, a fleeting instant when the world of the living and the dead gently touched. In that silence, a priest held a small jar filled with sacred oil and a living flame called Sekhem and Katha, final guardian fire. It was not hot like ordinary fire, but shimmered softly, as if breathing light. They said it came from the first altar ever lit in Heliopolis, where Ra separated light from darkness. When the flame touched the carved eye of Horus upon the offering stone, a low resonance filled the chamber, a sound like the heartbeat of the earth, vibrating yet serene. At that moment, the priests called the name of the departed softly, 3 times, no more, no less. 3 was balance, the symbol of body, soul, and spirit. If pronounced correctly, the flame of Sekhem would change color from gold to pale blue, then fade to white. It was the sign that the spirit had heard the call and returned briefly to listen. In an ancient tale, there was one night when the ritual failed. A young priest, trembling with fear, mispronounced the name of the dead. The flame did not shift color. It grew, hissing like desert wind. The incense fell, and the symbol on the altar stone split in 2. From that night onward, it was believed one spirit could never return, trapped between worlds, becoming an unintended guardian. Thus, the Sekhem flame came to symbolize not only purification, but warning that every fire holds 2 sides. One that illuminates and one that burns those unready. The elder priests then rewrote parts of the chant, replacing certain words with softer tones to avoid summoning lost souls too forcefully. They believed if a prayer was too strong, it could tear the veil between worlds. If too weak, it would never reach the one called balance was everything, just as Matt maintained harmony over chaos. Therefore, before lighting the flame, they would bow in silence for 100 seconds, not to pray, not to speak, but to listen to their own heartbeat, aligning their breath with that of the earth. When all was done, the second flame was extinguished with water drawn from the Nile before sunrise. Then the priest left the chamber without looking back. They believed that if one looked behind, his shadow would remain, becoming a shuyet detached from the body. So they walked slowly through the corridor toward the temple courtyard, where the desert wind greeted them softly. And beneath the paling sky, one by one, they gazed at the last star still shining, believing that there, among the gentle lights, the souls had finally reunited, calm and eternal. When the final night descended upon the desert of Thebes, the stars hung lower, as if reaching down to touch the aging peaks of the pyramids. The wind, carrying sands from the west, drifted across the valley, erasing footprints and sealing them beneath a long silence. Beneath the moonless sky, the tombs of kings and priests rested in perfect stillness, as though time itself had paused to listen to the earth's breath. No birds called, no insects stirred, only the soft murmur of wind slipping through old stones and the ruins of obelisks that once touched the heavens. Those who lived here had long turned to dust, yet among the stones something remained, not body, not voice, but a faint consciousness that refused to fade. Some say that on certain nights strange lights appear among the ancient tombs, not flames, but a soft shimmer like the reflection of water. They believe these are remnants of souls unfinished with their duty, eternal guardians waiting for the world to remember their names. Centuries later, archaeologists uncovered artifacts that seemed impossible, a vessel containing ash that had never burned, a prayer scroll written in silver ink, and hieroglyphs unknown anywhere else in Egypt. Each object seemed to whisper, yet its voice was swallowed by time. Some tried to read their meaning, others tried to interpret them as symbols. But as the years passed, one by one, the scholars left as though unwilling to disturb the stillness any further. One of them wrote in his final notes that on his last night in the valley, he heard a faint voice among the stones, not human, but a prayer repeated endlessly. His final line, written in fading ink, read, "The sands remember." Now, thousands of years later, the desert remains silent. Yet if one were to stand at the valley's edge as the southern wind arrives and close their eyes long enough, they might hear a distant echo, not from this time, but from one that no longer knows time at all. A soft murmur like the long breath of the earth flowing between grains of sand, speaking forgotten names, greeting those who sleep in peace. And there, beneath layers of soil and starlight, the secrets of ancient Egypt still pulse, not dead, only asleep, waiting to be remembered by a world that never truly listened. So if you gaze at the night sky and see a single star flicker above the desert, perhaps it is not a star, but an eye watching back from a time beyond reach. a gentle reminder that nothing is ever truly lost, only resting beneath the sands, waiting to be awakened by the whisper of time. In that eternal stillness, the mystery of Egypt lives on, like the last breath of an ancient world that refuses to die. And as you drift into sleep tonight, let the desert wind carry you there, to the silent valley where kings dream, where flame and shadow dance slowly without sound, waiting for a dawn that will never come.